Welcome to the CCNA 1 Module 1 to 3 exam review. In this section, we will cover basic network connectivity and communications related exam questions that you might get on your CCNA Module 1 to 3 exam. So I will be actually covering real exam questions that possibly show up on your CCNA exam. So this would be a good review for those of you who are taking the CCNA 1 program. Please keep in mind that I have already posted CCNA 1, CCNA 2 and CCNA 3 lectures already on my YouTube channel. And this covers every single topic for all three programs. And it is following, all of these are following the Cisco NetAcad CCNA lecture curriculum. I have 17 videos for CCNA 1, 17 lectures for CCNA 2, and 14 lectures for CCNA 3. And it covers every single concept that you need to know for each of these programs. We have hours worth of content, therefore covering these concepts already posted. So if you haven't watched my lectures for CCNA 1, CCNA 2 or CCNA 3, and if you are taking these classes, please go ahead and check my YouTube channel playlist so that you will have some background knowledge. So let's go ahead and look at some exam questions for CCNA 1 Module 1 exam. So the first question here is, this interface allows remote management of a layer 2 switch. Options we have is the aux interface, the console port interface, switch virtual interface, the first Ethernet port interface. I'll give you a few seconds to think about this. As a new Cisco CCNA 1 student, you should already familiar with this at this point because you may have done some labs. So the answer to this question is the switch virtual interface, also known as SVI, and this is a common interface that we use especially in layer 2 switches, where we use it as a interface to manage the switch. So for example, the layer 2 switches probably don't even need IP addresses in most situations. In generally, we don't need IP addresses for any of the ports for layer 2 switches except the switch virtual interface. Question number 2. What type of network traffic requires QoS, also known as quality of service? So this question is basically asking, when do we actually need QoS? So the answers could be email, online purchasing, server-based document access, video conferencing. Recall from your CCNA 1 lectures that I have already covered that QoS is not necessarily needed for things that doesn't require a lot of data and bandwidth. That includes the email, online purchasing or server-based document access, because those items doesn't require that much data throughput or bandwidth or network usage. Video conferencing, however, may require QoS because that will allow the person who is using video conferencing to access information, the packets, in a timely manner. Because if there is a delay in packets in video conferencing, you won't be able to have that proper quality of video during the conferencing time, right? So that's why QoS is needed for video conferencing. So the answer for this question is video conferencing. Question number 3. Why would your user the key combination CTRL shift 6 on a switch after issuing the ping command? So if you are using a Cisco device, why would you use the key combination CTRL shift number 6? The answers are to restart the ping process, to interrupt the ping process, to exit to a different configuration mode, to allow the user to complete the command. Again, I will give you a few seconds to think about this. What the Cisco is trying to ask here is that you have done a lot of labs in your module 1 to 3 section. So during those labs, why would you use CTRL Shift 6? At what point? What is the reason for it? So if you look at the answers, you will remember that, you know, if you have done your labs, that CTRL Shift 6 is typically used to interrupt something. So the answer to this question, if you look at all of these options we have here, has to be to interrupt ping process. So this is one of those things that I didn't actually memorize or study for my exam. I done a lot of labs to the point in back of my mind, I know the CTRL Shift 6 will give me the interrupt the ping process, you know, when I'm working with Cisco devices. So whether it's a Cisco router or a Cisco switch, you can use the CTRL Shift 6 to interrupt the ping process. So once you run the ping command. So again, if you're studying for these exams, you don't need to memorize this part. Just keep doing your lab and it'll eventually become a second nature. And that's the best way I advise you to study for a question like this. And we have few questions like this in this lecture. Question number 4. A network administrator is configuring access control to switch called SW1, that's the switch name. And if the administrator uses a console connection to connect to the switch, which password is needed to access user executive mode? And they gave you a screenshot of the configuration. On the right hand side, you see here, we have the SW1 switch and they have entered the command enable password, let me in, enable secret, and then they put the secret letting, and so we have two passwords here, and then line console 0, and then for line console 0 they have password line con in and login exit line VTY, we have 0 to 15, and we have the line VTY password and login and exit or end. Now, if these type of questions are very common in Cisco exams, and it has couple of password, let me in, secret in, line con in, and line VTY in. So these are possible solutions to this question. The question is asking which password is needed for user executive mode of this switch. So if you look at this configuration, you should be able to figure this out right away. Remember that it has to be line con in, because line con in is being entered at the line console 0, because that's where the user executive thing happens, right? The password configure under the required for the executive mode, has to be the line console 0 command, that because that is required to gain entry to the console port, and therefore enabling the line console 0. And with this particular password line con in, what we have basically done is we made this the privileged executive mode password. Again, this is something that you will learn as you go through the labs. This is a typical question that Cisco could ask you. Question number 5. What command is used to verify the condition of the switch interfaces, including the status of the interfaces and configured IP addresses? So they're asking, if you're using a Cisco router or a Cisco switch, what command do we use to check the, check what's happening with your switch or router? In other words, what are the configurations that has already been done? That's what you want to check. Would you use the IP config command, ping command, trace route command, or show IP interface brief command, which is I often use ship intbr, which is also works as well. So I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. This is a very easy question. So you will notice that IP config, ping, and trace route actually checking our network basically. So whether it's an intermediary device such as a switch or a router, it's just basically checking the network configurations or how good, if the network is working properly. So basically you can send a ping to an end device or another intermediary device, and you can check your IP configuration, etc. The only thing that is different here is the show IP interface brief command. And if you look at this question, it is asking, we want to know what our interfaces are doing in our switch, and the answer is show IP interface brief. Again, for me, this is an easy question, but if you're a new student, just starting out in CCNA 1, and this is your first exposure to Cisco devices, this may be something that you just learn, but as you can see, you can just eliminate anything that makes no sense, and then what left with is the answer. Question number 6. Which two devices are intermediary devices? Now, what is an intermediary device? So you need to know that first. You need to know what is an intermediary device. If you have a network and you have a computer here and you have a switch here and you have a router here and you have another computer here, and if this is connected like this, and let's say we also have a ISP modem connected right here, and then let's say I have another switch here. I'm just giving you some information just to make this question a little bit better. And let's say this is a printer, and there's another computer here, and let's say this is a server. So these are switches, by the way. So if I look at this diagram, this network diagram, for example, I just drew, what are the intermediary devices? So basically we want to know what consider as a device that is an intermediary device, right? In a local area network, that's what we are mostly focusing on here. The intermediary devices are devices that are in between your end devices or client devices, sometimes called client devices. So in other words, this router is an intermediary device. This switch is an intermediary device. This switch is an intermediary device. This modem may be considered as an intermediary device because it's connecting to the outside internet, right? So basically the end device is going to be the computers, servers, printers, etc. So the answer to this question, which two devices are intermediary devices, you had to look at from a point of view of a local area network, because as I mentioned, this modem can be considered as an intermediate device from the point of view of your internet service provider, or as local area network, this is actually can be considered as maybe the end device as well, but it is not actually. Typically speaking, the modems are also considered as an intermediate device. So in here, the intermediate device is gonna be the switch. So they're asking for what two devices. So it has to be the switch, and then the other one going to be the router. The reason for that is the router is also sitting in the middle. So intermediary device basically mean it's sitting in the middle. So the router and the switch going to be the two devices that's going to be intermediary on your network. The hosts and servers are end devices because they're at the end. That's what it says, the end devices, right? So the opposite of intermediate devices are end devices. End devices are not connected to any typically no other networking thing, right? So that's why these are considered as end devices. Now for servers, you may have other devices connecting across the server, but server is still typically considered as an end device because the server is connected to a switch, and the switch going to be the intermediate device and the server going to be the end device, even if there is a printer connected to the server that may be an additional component in this server. So keep that in mind. Sometimes that get a little bit confusing, but intermediate devices by definition of CCNA program are ones that are basically in the intermediate, in other words, in the middle of your network. Think about it as in the middle devices, right? So it will be router and the switch. Question number 7. An employee at a branch office is creating a code for a customer. In order to do this, the employee needs to access confidential pricing information from internal servers at the head office, in other words, HQ. What type of network would the employee access? So basically, employees accessing an internal network. So the options we have here is an intranet, the internet, an extranet, a local area network, also known as LAN. The confusion you might come across here is the options between the LAN, the local area network, and the intranet. Now, the answer to this question, I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about it, while keeping in mind that the confusion usually happens between the intranet and the local area network. So the employee at a branch office is creating a code for a customer, and in order to access this information, they are accessing confidential information from the head office system, right? So it can be the internet, it can be the extranet. Now we left with the intranet and the local area network. Think about which is better. The answer to this question is intranet, not local area network, LAN, because intranet is a term used in Cisco documentation that refer to a private connection of LANs and WANs that belong to a one single or multiple organizations that work together. In other words, intranet is designed to be accessible only by the organizational members, employees with authorization. Therefore, that is most likely the answer. Some people have put local area network LAN, and that answer is incorrect because Cisco clearly defined that in a situation like this, it would be considered as a intranet. The other answer you might get in here is a VPN, the virtual private network. That is also a possible answer, but it is still kind of falling in the umbrella of intranet. So the answer to question number 7 is intranet. Question 8. This interface allows remote management of layer 2 switch. Just few minutes ago, there was a similar question. Recall whether it's the aux interface, the console port interface, the switch virtual interface, or the first Ethernet port interface. On Cisco layer 2 switches, what do we typically use? I went over this few minutes ago in a different question. So the answer to this question would be the switch virtual interface, also known as SVI. All Cisco switches, especially layer 2 switches and routers, does come with the ability to configure SVI, and that's how you do it. That's how you access the management of that switch. Remember, I mentioned to you, one of the places in layer 2 switches that we actually configure a static IP address is the SVI, because that's what we use for accessing the switch for remote management. What method can be used by two computers to ensure that the packets are not dropped because too much data is being sent too quickly? So this is question number 9. So we have the answers such as the encapsulation, flow control, access method, response, timeout. So we basically have two computers that are communicating across a network, but each computer doesn't know the other computer's capability of handling packets. So how do we manage that information so that the system doesn't get clogged up and too much data won't send across the sys network, causing the whole thing to bog down or even to lose those packets? So in order for two computers to be able to communicate effectively, there must be some kind of a mechanism that allow the source and destination to set timing of transmission and receipt of data. Because if there is no timing between the transmission and receiving of data, the entire system going to get bogged down because of that too much data being sent across the network. So we have the answers such as the encapsulation, flow control, access method, and response timeout. I would definitely going to eliminate access method and encapsulation. However, response timeout and flow control are pretty close to each other answers. But as you may have learned in your lectures, I have covered in my lecture videos, what we do is we use something called flow control. Response timeout compared to flow control is also a similar one, but it is basically when the device doesn't have the information it needed, is times out, but it doesn't actually fix the problem of too much data being sent too quickly. What will fix this issue is the flow control mechanism. So that's the answer to question number 9. Question number 10. Which statement accurately describes a TCP/IP encapsulation process when a PC is sending data to the network? Which statement accurately describes a TCP/IP encapsulation process when a PC is sending data to the network? Remember our TCP/IP stack that we covered in my lecture? So this is what this question is trying to ask you. So what is TCP/IP stack? You need to know that to answer this question. So if you don't remember what it is, please go back to my lectures and watch them. And the answers here are: the data is sent from the internet layer to the network access layer. The packet are sent from the network access layer to the transport layer. Segments are sent from transport layer to the internet layer. Frames are sent from the network access layer to the internet layer. So which answer is correct given that we are looking at the TCP/IP model? So I will give you a few seconds to think about this because there's a lot of text in here. So if you look at the answers, the data is sent from the internet layer to the network access layer. That's not right? Packets are sent from the network access layer. Nope, not in TCP/IP encapsulation process. Segments are sent from transport layer to the internet layer. Segments. Oh, when the data is traveling from PC to the network, the transport layer sends segments to the internet layer. That sounds correct. And the last one says frames are sent, and that can be right. So it must be the segments are sent from transport layer to the internet layer, because that's the TCP/IP model, the operations. So again, remember, why does the TCP/IP model works this way? Because network engineers and but designers have came up with this model so we can standardize how we communicate across networks. So it's not like it's not like it's CCNA, like a lot of things in CCNA are not something called not nature, right? It's not like, if you ask me like why the heart pumps blood in a certain rhythm, that because of that's nature, we observe that in science, right? But in CCNA program, because we developed networks, it's not natural that we have these internet packet switching systems, right? We developed based on the TCP/IP model, and we decided that segments are sent from transport layer to the internet layer is how the TCP/IP model should work, and that's why this answer is correct. Because I had few people ask me like, why does this answer is correct? Because that's how we develop the TCP/IP model. So let's go to the next question. Question number 11 is basically a matching question. The question is, an administrator is configuring a switch console port with a password. In what order will the administrator travel through the iOS modes of operation in order to reach the mode in which the configuration commands will be entered? In other words, what would the administrator go through when they are configuring a Cisco switch? What are the things that they should do? What would be the first mode? What would be the second mode, third mode, and the final mode? In that order. On the right hand side, we have few options: interface configuration mode, privilege executive mode, line configuration mode, global configuration mode, and user exec mode. Again, this is a lab related exam question. If you have done your Cisco labs and cover your lectures properly and you understand your lab, this should be an easy question. For example, what would be the first mode in here? Well, it has to be the user executive mode, right? When you turn on a Cisco switch, the first mode you're going to see is a user executive mode. So you should know that by doing lab. Like, I don't even have to check anything. I know by second hand by doing so many labs and configuration. And the second mode is going to be the privilege executive mode. So this has to match with this one. And so on and so forth. So the answer to this question will be this. So it's going to be the first mode going to be the user executive mode, and the second mode going to be the privilege executive mode, and then the third mode going to be the global configuration mode, and the final mode going to be the line configuration mode. Interface configuration mode is not part of this series of steps that this administrator have taken, because we are not configuring an interface. Again, this is one of those questions that Cisco may throw into your lecture exams, but it is actually part of your labs. Question number 12. At which OSI layer is a source IP address added to a PDU during the encapsulation process? Remember, we used the OSI layer model for our networking infrastructure, like how we develop our networks. So it is asking, at what place in that OSI layer model that we are going to have the source IP address added to the PDU, right? So the answers are network layer, data link layer, application layer, and presentation layer. Now, if you don't understand how the mechanism of OSI layer works, this is one place I don't mind if you memorize the answer. The answer to this question is the network layer. And the reason I'm saying that it's okay to memorize is because if you are a student and if you're trying to learn networking, it may be a little bit harder to understand all the other concepts and everything. So I don't mind if you actually memorize the OSI model. I covered OSI model on my previous videos, so go ahead and check it out. But if you properly understand that this is an easy question, it's a network layer. So that's the answer to question number 12. Again, if you don't understand OSI layer model, just memorize these concepts and you should be good to go. I know it sounds bad as an instructor telling you to do that, but don't worry. a lot of people memorize the OSI model. Question number 13. Which of the following is the name for all computers connected to a network that participate directly in network communication? Servers, intermediary devices, host media, client devices. I'll give you a few seconds to think about it, because this is an easy question, not because of the question is easy, but because of the answers. Look at the answers. Servers, intermediary devices, host devices or host media, client devices. So if you look at the answers, notice that one answer is unlike the other. Servers, host media, and client devices are all end devices. The only one that is not an end device is the intermediary devices. This is an easy question. You shouldn't spend too much time on it. As far as the technical concepts here, that the network device that directly communicate, it would be devices that are like a switches and routers in the middle of the network. So that would be the intermediary devices. So the answer to this question is intermediary devices. And if you have no idea what this question is asking, which is the following name for all computers connected to a network that participate directly in a network communication, you are just confused about this particular statement or question, you can basically eliminate like answers, and what you are left with is unlike answer, which is the intermediary devices. This is a really good question example of that. Unfortunately, Cisco could ask and give you some few other options in here and ask you to pick two. But again, in that situation, it's going to get a little bit complicated. But in this particular question number 13, even if you don't understand what the question is asking, you can eliminate it by grouping like answers from unlike answers. So intermediary devices is the answer. It is the unlike answer out of all four here. And the reason for that is intermediate devices are such as switches and routers, and those participate directly in network communication, as opposed to servers and client devices, which are end devices that don't directly participate in communications of the entire local area network. So that's the answer to question number 13, and a trick to answer that question if you don't know, if you end up with a similar question like this and you don't know the answer. Just eliminate answers when you're picking the one that is odd one out. Question number 14. What function does pressing the tab key have when entering a command in Cisco iOS software, right? The firmware. So Cisco firmware iOS is installed on switches and routers and other Cisco devices that we work with. So it's asking, how does the tab key, interact with that OSI software? Answers include it aborts the current command and return to configuration mode. It exits configuration mode and returns to the executive mode. It moves the cursor to the beginning of the next line. It completes the remainder of a partially typed word in a command. So what would be the answer? You can think about it. Think about your labs. So the answer to this question is it completes the remainder of a partially typed word in a command. This is also true not only in Cisco iOS firmware, but also many other programs and software, etc., etc. An example of this would be Windows PowerShell. If you would like to learn Windows PowerShell scripting, I am doing a lecture series on beginning to Windows PowerShell tutorials for beginners. In there, I also showed you that, even in not only just in Cisco iOS, even in Windows PowerShell, you can partially type a commandlet and then press the tab key to complete it. The only caveat about this is that if you partially type a word that is not found in the Cisco iOS database, it has nothing to do with the Cisco iOS, it will not complete anything. It will not give you any error messages or anything like that. It doesn't do anything. This is same with the Windows PowerShell, and keep that in mind. This is same in many other programs, therefore. So this is like a Linux-like, Unix-like behavior. Cisco IOS is actually based on Unix Linux platform, and therefore by partially typing in the command, pressing the tab, you can complete the command. So that's the answer to that question. Question number 15. What process involves placing one PDU inside of another PDU? Again, go back to your models that we covered previously. OSI model, and in the basically in that OSI model, like, what process involves placing one PDU inside another PDU? Like I mentioned, if you don't understand how those models work, just memorize this particular concept. Basically, when a message is placed inside of another message, it is known as what? That's the question is asking. When a message is placed inside another message, what do we call it? Like on network, what do we call when take a piece of information or message and put it inside another message? So the answers include the encapsulation, encoding, segmentation, and flow control. Right away, it is very easy to eliminate two of these: flow control and segmentation, because flow control is used for what? Yeah, so when we have many devices in a network and they are communicating at different times, and you don't want to have all the data flowing into the network and bogging down and creating there's too much data being passed around, we use the flow control, right? Segmentation is not that answer either, because it doesn't actually, segmentation does not put inside another, it basically segment information, right? So we have two options: encapsulation and encoding. The answer to this question is encapsulation. And encapsulation is when a message is placed inside another message. In other words, on network, encapsulation takes place when one protocol unit is carried inside of a data field in the next lower protocol data unit. We call a encapsulation. Again, if you don't understand that concept, you can even memorize this. Trust me, you can get a really good grade by if you don't understand the concept. I'm just going over some Cisco questions in this video. So if you are interested in like the concepts behind this, it's already covered on my YouTube channel. Go ahead and check it out. Question number 16. This term best describes a network owned by one organization that provides safe and secure access to individuals who work for a different organization. Again, they are using very specific wording here. This term is describing a network owned by a company A that provides safe and secure access to individuals who work for company B or organization B, right? So they include the extranet, the cloud, the BYOD. BYOD stand for bring your own device, and Cisco use this term BYOD a lot in their lecture materials and exams, and they would not describe it. Sometimes even the quality of service, they would just put QoS instead of putting quality of service. So you should know what it is. The local area network, LAN, again, they might describe it as LAN. So extranet, cloud, BYOD, QoS, or LAN. Again, keep in mind, Cisco exams don't always describe acronyms or abbreviations. You will often come across BYOD, QoS, LAN, and you should know what they are. So BYOD stands for bring your own device. So we are looking for the term that describes the network owned by one organization that provides safe and secure access to individuals working for a different organization. So I'll give you a little bit of time to think about it. And again, I already know the answer. So the answer to this question is the extranet. You might be thinking VPN. That's another possible answer. But it is extranet, not VPN, because VPN is allow even the people within your own organizations to access data remotely. The whole purpose of a VPN is allowing secure remote access to your data, whether it is your own organizational people, or if you want to give access to some other organizational people. But the whole concept of one organization accessing another organization data through secure means is basically defined by extranet. Question number 17. What 3 application layer protocols are part of the TCP IP protocol suite? Remember, we are now looking at the TCP IP stack. Again, some people call TCP IP stack. It's not really the same. TCP IP stack is using Windows, for example, to describe how the Windows devices such as Windows servers use the TCP IP protocol. So in TCP IP protocol, they're asking what 3 application layer protocols are part of that TCP IP suite. So we have ARP, DHCP, NAT, DNS, FTP, PPP. Again, this is one of those places Cisco don't give you that DHCP stand for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. You need to know NAT stand for Network Address Translation, DNS stand for Domain Name Server or Service, FTP, so etc, etc. So you need to know what all of these means, because Cisco don't actually explain what they are. So we need to pick 3 of these, right? So that includes the DHCP, DNS, and FTP. ARP, NAT, and PPP are not part of the TCP IP protocol suite. Again, this is something you either should know by experience or working with networks, or just memorize what TCP IP stack is, and the only things they're going to show up is DHCP, DNS, and FTP. NAT, ARP, and PPP are not part of the TCP IP protocols stack or suite. ARP, NAT are mostly related to basically network configuration options, right? I have covered what ARP and NAT are in my previous lectures. You can go ahead and check it out. So we end up with these 3 answers. Question number 18. This name is assigned to transport layer PDU. Bits, data, frame, packet, segment. This name is assigned to the transport layer PDU. So again, this is a model that we use. So if you look at our transport layer, you can remember, if you recall, that the application data, remember, the passed down to the protocol stack on its way to the transmitted across the network media, and then during that process the various protocols are added information to each protocol add information at each level, and if you look at the transport layer PDU, you'll notice that it has to be the segment. Again, I'm not going to explain this any depth than this, because I already have went through that in my previous videos. You can go and check it out. The answer to this question is segment. Question number 18. What term describes a computing model where server software runs on dedicated computers? What term describes a computing model where server software runs on dedicated computers? Client server, internet, intranet, extranet, LAN. Easy question, because you can again use the process of elimination on your exam, during your exam, because you have how many answers here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 answers. The only thing that is out of, for me, is pretty obvious, is the client server. So, and the answer should be client server, because what term describes the computing model where the server software runs on a dedicated computers? And the answer is client server. Intranet describe, remember, it's how one organization connects to another organization's data. Intranet. Internet is the the internet we use. Sorry, intranet is the internal network. Extranet is one organization connected to the other organization. Sorry about that, I misspoke. Extranet is one organization connected to another organization, and local area network is LAN, and it has to be the client server. Again, this is one of those places you can do process of elimination. Question number 20. A technician configures a switch with these commands. So these are the commands that we have. So the technician get into the switch A and they enter interface VLAN 1 or INT VLAN 1, enter IP address, and they give IP address with the subnet mask 255.255.255.0, and then they go no shutdown. So we need to know how Cisco software works, firmware works, and you learn this through again your labs. So by going through this process of interface VLAN 1, what they are actually, this technician is figuring out, configuring is the SVI, virtual switch virtual interface. And the only reason I know this because I have done a lot of labs. So this is something very specific to Cisco devices. So if you are using other devices, this is not the same. But because we are learning CCNA and you more probably want to do CCNP, you need to know that if you are looking at this kind of configuration, you are looking at a configuring SVI. Again, it will come as you are doing your labs. The answer is SVI, and it will be make so much sense to you later. Question number 21. During a routine inspection, a technician discovered that software that was installed on a computer was secretly collecting data about websites that are visited by user of the computer. In other words, it is secretly gathering data. There's a software that is secretly gathering data without the knowledge of the user or the administrator. Which type of threat is affecting this computer? DOS attack, also known as denial of service attack, identity theft, spyware, zero-day attack. Again, I have covered these attacks on my and the threats and attacks on my previous lectures, and this should be an easy question, and the answer to this question is spyware, because it is spying on your user. So the spyware. DOS is basically denial of service. You probably have heard about the term DDoS, which is distributed denial of service, using my type of a botnet, for example. Identity theft, yeah, it could be identity theft, but the information provided here doesn't mention anything about secretly collecting specific identity data, but rather it's just collecting data of websites that they are visiting. So it is spyware is the answer. And the zero-day attack is a software that sits on the device, server, or computer for a long time, then suddenly it decided to attack at a certain time or after a certain period. So the answer here is a spyware. Question number 22. Which device performs the function of determining the path that messages should take through internet works? So we are asking, like, this question is kind of weird, the last word, internet works. So what basically this is asking is, which device performs the function of determining the path where the packet should be routed across the network? I use the word routed across. So I already gave you kind of the answer. A router, a firewall, a web server, or DSL modem. So again, the primary function of a router is routing packets. So the answer to this question is a router, because that performs the function of deciding where the message is going to be routed through your network, and that's why the router is the answer for this question. Question number 22. So this question is basically Cisco wants to test your knowledge on network routers work. How routers work, right? I shouldn't even use the term network routers, because it just basically we call them routers, right? It's routing data, right? That's the whole point of a router on a network. So next question have a lot of text. So I'm gonna read it for you, and then you can read it through as well. So this is question number 23. Refer to the exhibit right here. So we have host A, host B, we have route A, router B, and we have switch A, switch B. So we have a host A connected to switch A, connected to the router A, and router A connected to the router B, and then router B connected to switch B, and then we have the server B. So this is how this network. This is a very simple network. server B is attempting to contact host A. So server B is trying to contact the host A. Which two statements correctly identify the addressing that the server B will generate in the process? So it's not host A trying to contact server B. That's the first thing you need to remember. It's a server B trying to contact host A. And they're asking what are the, two statements that is correct in here when in terms of addressing, right? So the answers include the server B will generate a packet with the destination IP address of router B. Server B will generate a frame with the destination MAC address of switch B. Server B will generate a packet with the destination IP address of router A. Server B will generate a frame with destination MAC address of router B. Server B will generate a packet with the destination IP address of host A. Server B will generate a frame with the destination MAC address of router A. That's a lot of information. So I'm going to let you think about this for a few minutes. So remember, in order to send data to another device, the device that is sending data needs to generate a packet that contains the IP address of the destination, right? So in this situation, the server B needs to generate something with the IP address in the host A, right? But it has to go through all of these intermediary devices. So that means that, the frame also needs to have some MAC address information of the default gateway device on the local network. You can't just send through the IP address. So the answers includes the server B will generate a frame with destination MAC address of the router B, and the server B will generate a packet with the destination IP address of the host A. So the answer to this question, when the server B is trying to communicate to host A, it's going to generate a frame with the destination MAC address of router B, and it will also generate a packet with the destination IP address of the host A. So those are the two answers, because in order for a device to communicate, it needs to have the destination information, but it's going to be the destination MAC address of, in this situation, the router B, because that's the first hop. So it's hop 1, hop 2, right? That's 2 hop situation. Switches are not hops, right? So because of that, the server B needs to generate the MAC address of the router B, not the router A, router B, and then the IP address of the host A. If the host A is trying to communicate to server B, that would be the MAC address of the router B A, not router B, router A, and the IP address of server B. So the answer to this, because it's communicating from server B to server host A, these two. The server B will generate frame with the destination MAC address of the router B, and the server B will also generate a packet with the destination IP address of the host A. Question number 24. A networking technician is working on the wireless network at a medical clinic. The technician accidentally set up the wireless network so that the patients can see the medical records data of other patients. So we have a huge problem here, right? So which of the 4 network characteristics has been violated in this situation? They're not asking 4 answers here, by the way. They're asking just one answer. Which of the one of the 4 here that has been violated? Fault tolerance, scalability, security, quality of service, also known as QoS, and reliability. Very easy question. If you get this question wrong, I would be very disappointed, because fault tolerance, nope. Scalability means it's a completely different concept. Scalability of your internal network, so in devices, that's different. Security, yeah, that's the answer. It's a security. So this is a very easy question. So sometimes Cisco throw out questions like this on your exam. You will find some questions are very easy, and you will be scratching your head like, did Cisco ask me a very easy question? Yes, There will be some easy questions on your CCNA module exams and final exams, and this is one of those things that you're gonna come across. So the answer is the security. Question number 25. Which term refers to a network that provides secure access to a corporate offices by suppliers, customers, and collaborators? Internet, intranet, extranet, extended net, and VPN. Students and new people who are learning CCNA material will be confused with VPN and extranet. We know it's not internet, we know it's not intranet. It has to be either extranet or VPN. We have two answers that's possible. If you read the question again, it's asking which term refers to a network that provides a secure access to a corporate offices, suppliers, customers, and collaborators. The answer is extranet, even though VPN is a possible answer. Why? Because extranet is an umbrella term that includes VPN in Cisco material. I know it is confusing because VPN could be a good answer here as well, but the answer here, you need to remember that the Cisco used the extranet. The term extranet is being used multiple times on CCNA 1 textbooks and lecture materials to describe a network where your external suppliers, external people can have access to your internal network. So that's called the extranet. So again, which term refers to a network that provides secure access to a corporate offices by suppliers, customers, and collaborators? The answer is extranet, not VPN, because extranet is the term that is describing above here. Question number 26. At which layer of the OSI model, again we are going back to the OSI model, would a logical address be added during encapsulation process? In other words, during the encapsulation process in our OSI model, at which layer would you be adding the logical address, right? Physical layer, data link layer, network layer, transport layer. So I will give you a few seconds to think about it, because if you think hard, you can actually answer this question, or you can memorize the OSI model like I mentioned. So again, looking at the OSI model, the logical addresses, also known as IP addresses, are added at the network layer. So the answer to this question is network layer, because physical addresses are added at the data link layer, and the port addresses are added at the transport layer. So the port addresses goes at the transport layer, and the physical addresses goes, physical addresses at the data link layer. So basically, it has to be the network layer. At the physical layer, we don't add any addresses at all. So physical layer doesn't have any addresses. You end up with the network layer as the answer. Again, I want to repeat that. Physical layer, no addresses are added, right? And then we have the physical addresses added at the data link layer, and we have the transport layer that get the port addresses added, and the network layer is the one that will have the logical addresses added. Question number 27. Which statement is correct about network protocols? Network protocols define the type of hardware that is used and how it is mounted in racks. They define how messages are exchanged between the source and destination. They all function in the network access layer of TCP/IP model. They are only required for exchange of messages between devices on remote networks. So if you look at the answers, I will give you a few minutes to think about it. This is an easy question. So they're asking, why do we even need network protocols? Remember, unlike how the human heart is functioning, the networks are functioning in a certain way because we, the human, decided we are going to use these particular protocols and way of functioning it, right? So the question here basically asking which statement is the correct about why we use network protocols, right? Well, the reason why we use network protocol is because network protocols are implemented in hardware, software, or both, and they actually allow us to define how everybody interact with each other. So the protocols have nothing to do with the actual media that been installed. You can have an IBM switch and a HP router and a Cisco switch, and they can work together because they all have a defined way of working together. So that's called the network protocol. So the network protocols define how messages are exchanged between the source and destination, and it allows the interoperability between different manufacturers, etc., etc. So the only reason we have a functioning internet because we have defined the network protocols. So that's the answer to that question. Question number 28. After making configuration changes on a Cisco switch, a network administrator uses a copy running config startup config command. What is the result of issuing this command? The network configuration will be loaded if the switch is restarted. The current iOS file will be replaced with a new configuration file. The configuration changes will be removed and the original configuration will be restored. The configuration will be stored in flash memory. Again, I will let you think about this. This is from your labs. This is a specific way of Cisco iOS firmware works on your Cisco switches and also on your Cisco routers. And if you think about it, the answer is very simple. So basically, with the copy running config startup config command, the content of the current operating configuration replaces the startup configuration with the NVRAM, right? That's what it does. So the answer to this one is the new configuration will be loaded if the switch is restarted. So once the command is ran, if the switch goes power out and power back on, or you restart the switch, whatever you have done here because of this command, it will be in the NVRAM, so it won't be get lost. So basically this is copy running config startup config. It is taking the running configuration and saving it to the startup configuration, or in other words NVRAM, so it will be saved. So all the configuration changes you have done will be saved by running that command. So when the next time the switch booter reboots or shut down and restart, all the configuration changes you did will be saved. So that's what it is doing. Question number 29. A web client is receiving a response for a web page from a web server. From the perspective of the client, what is the correct order of protocol stack that is used to decode the receive transmission? From the perspective of the client. So remember that a web client, in other words, you sitting in front of a laptop or a computer, is receiving a response from a web page that is located on a web server, obviously, right? Let's say sanuja.com. So how does, from your point of view, the sanuja.com information being delivered to you in terms of the protocol stack? So remember, your device is basically connected to what? Well, we have the answers here. We have the Ethernet, TCP, IP, HTTP, HTTP, Ethernet, IP, TCP, etc., etc. There's a different orders of TCP, IP, HTTP, and the Ethernet, right? So think from your point of view. What is your connection to the outside? What is your immediate connection from your device? Well, the HTTP governs the way that the web servers and clients interact, right? The TCP manages the individual conversations between the web server and the client, while the IP is responsible for delivery across the best path to destination, and the Ethernet is what actually we use for the packet from the IP formats to be transmitted, right? So from your point of view, it is this one, because you are connected to the Ethernet first. Then it has to go to the IP, which is responsible for the delivery across best destination path. Then you use the TCP and then the HTTP. So the answer to this question is this. However, if the question is asking from the perspective of the web server, it's gonna be other way around. for now, from your point of view, it's the Ethernet TCP, Ethernet IP, TCP, HTTP. So that's the answer. Question number 30. What command will prevent all unencrypted password from displaying in plain text in a configuration file? This is specifically referring to your Cisco labs, and what this question is basically asking you is how Cisco iOS firmware operates on Cisco switches and routers. So what command would you give to your Cisco switch or router that would prevent any unencrypted password from displaying on the console? So we have the enable password secret, enable secret and then the password, service password encryption command, the enable secret encrypt underscore password command. So there are a bunch of commands. Some of them are not actually valid, showing on your screen. Again, with doing all those labs, you will probably get this question like that. So to prevent the configured password from disappearing on the plain text configuration file, the administrator basically has to run the password encryption command, and that command is the service password encryption. It's a specific service that is built into or baked into your Cisco iOS firmware, and that's the answer to that question. Next question we have here is question number 31. And how is SSH different from Telnet? Remember, now we mostly use SSH. Telnet consider as a legacy way of connecting to a device. Some people still use Telnet in certain situations, but majority of time we use SSH. So how is SSH different from Telnet, right? What makes SSH unique or better? The answers include the SSH makes connections over the network, whereas Telnet is for out of band access, which is not true. So I already gave you the answer for that. SSH provides security to remote sessions by encrypting messages and using user authentication. Telnet is considered insecure and sends messages in plain text. SSH requires the use of the PuTTY terminal emulation program. Teraterm must be used to connect to devices through the use of Telnet. SSH must be configured over an active network connection, whereas Telnet is used to connect to a device from a console connection. So these are the 4 answers provided to us. You just have to pick one. So you need to describe how SSH different from Telnet. I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about this. So again, SSH is the preferred protocol for connecting to a device operating system over a network because it is more secure than Telnet, right? Telnet is basically a legacy device. Both SSH and Telnet can be used to connect to a device over a network and are both are considered as in-band connections. And PuTTY and Teraterms are software that can be used with both SSH and Telnet. So given that all that information, the best answer here is the answer number 2, which is the SSH provides security to remote sessions by encrypting messages and using user authentication. And Telnet is considered insecure and send messages in plain text, and that's why you use SSH. But again, PuTTY and Teraterm both can be used for this purpose. So the answer is answer number 2. Question number 32. What term describes a technology that allows devices connect to the LAN using an electrical outlet? So in other words, instead of using Ethernet cables, the Cat5, Cat6 cables, you are using electrical outlets, electrical wiring to connect networking devices. Power line networking, power over Ethernet, also known as PoE, extranet, E-internet, E-internet, internet? So for answer to this question is very simple. It's power line networking. Power line networking, as it's described in English, that those two terms basically mean using the power line connections or electrical connections to connect to your devices. The power over Ethernet, which is similar to similar sounding like the power line networking, is completely different concept. What this allows us to do is use Ethernet cables such as Cat5 and Cat6 cable to send power, electrical power, to our end devices or intermediary devices. Typically the end devices such as security cameras, or you can power on security cameras, or network security cameras, or security devices, or access points. So if you have a Ethernet access, wireless WLAN access point, you can typically power on that device using the power over Ethernet if it support those IEEE PoE 802.3 standards. So that's what the power over Ethernet is. So the answer to this question is power line networking, which uses the electrical wiring instead of network wiring to connect networking devices within a local area network. Question number 33. While trying to solve a network issue, a technician made multiple changes to the current router configuration file. The changes did not solve the problem and were not solved. What action can the technician take to discard the changes and work with the file in NVRAM? Again, this is going back to your Cisco labs, and this is specific to Cisco switches or Cisco routers. In this case, they are trying to go back on the Cisco NVRAM, right? So that's what they're doing. So again, they are trying to solve a network issue. They made few commands in the command line, and the changes that the technician made didn't solve the problem. Now we need to go back and we need to discard all those changes you made, right? So the options are: close and reopen the terminal emulation software, delete the VLAN.dat or dat file and reboot the device, issue the reload command without saving the running configuration, issue the copy startup config running config command. So you have 4 options. One thing I can tell you, please don't do the last one. Startup config running config will basically a bad idea. Don't do that. Instead, what you all need to do is issue the reload command without saving the running configuration, because we haven't saved the running configuration. It'll basically reload your router or the switch, and then you'll be back at whatever you start at the beginning. As long as you haven't saved your work, you should be good to go back to the beginning. Question number 34. This organization is the largest developer of international standards in the world for a wide variety of products and services. In IT, it is well known for creating the Open System Interconnection Reference Model. Remember the OSI model? The Open System Interconnection Model is basically the OSI model. This is a shortened or abbreviated form that we often familiar with. This model is developed by this particular organization, but they also do a lot of wide variety of international standardizations across the board. So they're asking what this organization is. So INA, IANA, ISO, EIA, ISOC or ISOC, IEEE. So which of these organizations is responsible for the OSI model, in other words? Again, this is one of these questions in Cisco where they don't describe what INA is, don't describe what IEEE is. You just have to know by the abbreviation because you are a networking student and you are being exposed to these terms. So INA stands for Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. ISO stands for International Organization for Standardization. EIA stands for Energy Information Administration, as far as I can find. And ISOC is the Internet Society, and the IEEE is the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. in this question, not only the OSI model is developed by this particular organization, but also it gives a hint the worldwide, they create international standard for a wide variety of products. Means it has to be the ISO, which is the International Standard Organization. They not only do standardization of electronic and electrical devices, they also do standardization of networking devices, sometimes certain products, safety products. For example, bicycle helmets. ISO have bicycle helmets standardizations, water pipelines standardizations, electrical standardization. They do a lot of standardization in ISO. And for OSI model, they also develop the OSI model for us, for our IT professionals, networking professionals. So the answer is ISO, International Organization for Standardization. Question number 35. What term best describes a type of network used by people who work from home or from a small remote office? So again, please read the question very carefully, because Cisco throw out answers like BYOD, SO, HO network, quality of service, converged network, and VPN all the time in exam questions as answers. But read the question carefully, because that might be the difference between picking the wrong answer and the right answer. So they're asking what term best describe a type of network used by people who work from home or from a small remote office. It doesn't mention anything about secure connections. It doesn't mention anything about a specific way of configuration of networks or anything like that. Just somebody's working from home, right? It doesn't mention that they are connecting to office network or anything like that. So the answers could be BYOD stand for bring your own device. This is the small office, home office network. Quality of service, QoS, converged network, and VPN, virtual private network. If you look at the 5 answers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 answers. There's 2 answers possible: small office, home office network, or SOHO network, or VPN. But does the VPN actually make sense when they are just working from home? Can I do my own business from home, not connecting to any network? Yeah, I can. I can work from home without having a VPN, right? So the answer is small office, home office network. So the answer to this question, now question number 35, is small SOHO network, because the VPN is not get eliminated, because we are not talking about any secure network, somebody who is remotely working connecting to their office network. So it's not VPN, it's SOHO. So that can be a little bit confusing. Question number 36. What term describes a network where one computer can be both client and server? What term describes a network where one computer can be both client and server? Virtual private network, also known as VPN, cloud, BYOD, peer-to-peer, and they might also give you a question answer called client server. So the answers could be VPN, cloud, BYOD, peer-to-peer, or client server. In here, we don't have the client server as an answer, but don't get confused with the client server and peer-to-peer. The answer to this question is peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer is a type that is used also on torrents. Like if you're downloading torrenting, let's say a open source software, for example, that will be peer-to-peer. What that's going to do is it's going to make your computer not only a client, but also the server when it is handing out those BitTorrent bits to the outside, and then when it is downloading those bits, it becomes the client. So it is peer-to-peer is the answer for question number 36. Again, you might get another answer here saying client server. That is not the right answer here either. Question number 37 has a image or screenshot of a configuration of a router or a switch, in this case a switch of a Cisco IOS device right here. So it says refer to this exhibit right here. The administrator is trying to configure the switch but receives the error message that is displayed in this exhibit. So the invalid input detected at this marker. And what is the problem here? That's the question. So administrator enter this config key, end up with an error, can't go anywhere. So what's wrong with it, right? The answers are the entire command configuration terminal must be used. Sorry, the entire command configuration terminal is not used here, so that it must be used here. The administrator is already in global configuration mode. The administrator must first enter privilege executive mode before issuing this particular command. The administrator must connect via the console port to access the global configuration mode. So I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. So the answer to this question is the administrator must first enter privilege exec mode before issuing this command. They are not in privilege exec mode because you can see that right after the switch, this is the name, the switch one is the name. Right after this arrow, this is they are basically entering whatever the command they are trying to enter. So that means they are not in privilege exec mode, because privilege exec mode have that brackets and other information before this this arrow, right? So that's how we know that. So in other words, in order to enter the global configuration mode, the command configure terminal, or the shortened version is the config T, must be entered in the privilege executive mode. Question number 38. Passwords can be used to restrict access to all or parts of the Cisco iOS firmware, right? And select the modes and interfaces that can be protected with password. So in other words, select 3 of these options actually that allow you to protect your password in Cisco iOS firmware. So the answers includes the VTY interface, console interface, Ethernet interface, boot iOS mode, privilege executive mode, and router configuration mode. Again, some of these answers are obviously wrong, and the answers to this I will let you think about it for a few seconds. They include the VTY interface, console interface, and the privilege executive mode. Again, if you have done all your labs and if you have been doing labs as you go through your classes, this should be an easy answer for you. Question number 39. When IPv4 addressing is manually configured on a web server, which property of IPv4 configuration identifies the network and host portion for an IP address? In other words, how does the IPv4 addressing works? That is basically the question. So when IPv4 addressing is manually configured on a web server, you've done it, and how do you actually do it on the property of that IPv4 configuration that identify the network and the host? Where do you see that the configuration identified? So the answer to that question is a subnet mask. This should be an easy question. It's not the DNS server address, it's not the default gateway, it's not the DHCP server address, or it is not the network name. It is the subnet mask, right? Because subnet mask determines the network address portion and the host portion of a IPv4 address, right? So that's why it is a subnet mask. So if you don't remember the subnet mask, remember the subnet mask. Like for example, if I go 255.255.255.0, this is a subnet mask, and these octets right here we have, each of these octets basically identify the network address portion, host portion of the IP address that you are entering. So the subnet mask is what actually a property of that IPv4 configuration that identify the network and the host portion of your configuration. Question number 40. Which statement describes the use of power line networking technology? Which statement describes the use of power line networking technology? New smart electrical cabling is used to extend an existing home LAN. A home LAN is installed without the use of physical cabling. A device connects to an existing home LAN using an adapter and an existing electrical outlet. Wireless points use power line adapters to distribute data through the home LAN. So I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. I already covered a little bit about power line networking on previous question, so this should be an easy answer for you, because remember, power line networking adds the ability to connect devices to the network using what? I already gave a little bit of answer. Using your electrical cables, right? So the answer is a device that connects to an existing home LAN using an adapter and an existing electrical outlet. So that's the statement that describes power line networking technology. Question number 41. What are 3 characteristics of SVI? SVI stands for Switch Virtual Interface. Remember Switch Virtual Interface, which being used on Cisco layer 2 switches, for example, for remote access. So what 3 characteristics of the SVI, right? This includes, it is designed as a security protocol to protect switch ports. It is not associated with any physical interface on a switch. It is a special interface that allows connectivity by different types of media. It is required to allow connectivity by device at any location. It provides a means to remotely manage a switch, and it is associated with VLAN 1 by default. So what are the 3 things that is true about SVIs or switch virtual interfaces in Cisco devices especially? I'll let you think about this for a few seconds. So the answers include, it is not associated with any physical interface on a switch, because SVI, as it says, switch virtual interface, it is a virtual interface. It's not physical switch port. It provides a means to remotely manage the switch, because that's the whole point of having SVI. This layer 2 switches doesn't need actually IP addresses except that SVI, because that way we can have that remote access and remote management interface. And it is associated with VLAN 1 by default on all Cisco devices. So Cisco iOS built in that way, it's baked into the Cisco iOS. So those are the 3 answers for question number 41. Question 42. In the show running command, which part of the syntax is represented by running config? In the show running config command, which part of the syntax is represented by the running config? The command, a keyword, a variable, a prompt. So again, this is something related to your labs. If you have done your labs, you should know it is the keyword. The first part of the syntax shows that it is, shows the command. The second part of the syntax is the running config, and in the keyword, that is what specify basically the output of that command. So the show run, so the running dash config command, there is a keyword in this particular way of syntax, the way of using the Cisco syntax. Again, these are all lab related items. Why it is? Because that's how the Cisco developed the Cisco iOS software or firmware. Question number 43. What layer is responsible for routing messages through an inter-network in the TCP IP model? Again, what layer in the TCP IP model is responsible for routing messages through an inter-network, right? So the answers are internet, transport, network access, session. Internet, transport, network access, and session. So in TCP IP model, remember there are 4 layers, right? Application, transport, internet, and network access. So which of those layers are being used, right? So to answer this question, I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about it. So it will be the internet. That is the answer, as that is responsible for routing messages, right? Question number 44. A network administrator enters the service password encryption command into the configuration mode of a router. What does this command accomplish? So what does the password encryption command basically accomplishing on a Cisco IOS router? The answers includes this command encrypts password as they are transmitted across serial WAN or WAN links. The command enables a strong encryption algorithm for enable secret password command. This command prevents someone from viewing the running configuration password. This command automatically encrypts password in configuration files that are currently stored in NVRAM. This command provides an exclusive encrypted password for external service personnel who are required to do router maintenance. So I'll let you think about it. So remember, the command is the service password encryption command. And remember, the startup config and running config files display most passwords in plain text. So we need to find a way to basically encrypt those ones in the global command so that the plain text password don't appear. So the answer to this question is this command enables a strong encryption algorithm for the enable secret password command. The term strong encryption, it's debatable right here. I don't know about that, because reason for that is all Cisco iOS devices use the same encryption algorithm, and it is all over the internet. Even if you run the password encryption command, I know how to quote unquote hack into the device and see your password. So I don't know about the strong encryption. I would use the word this command enables encryption algorithm for the secret password command. As far as how strong it is, that's debatable. But the answer is this. Question number 45. An ISP can be best described as it is a standards body that develops cabling and wiring standard for networking. It is a protocol that enables how computers within a local network communicate. It is a network device that combines the functionality of several different networking devices in one. It is one organization that enables individuals and businesses to connect to the internet. Very easy question. I don't even want to wait much longer here on this question. The answer is it is an organization that enables you and businesses to connect to the internet, because that's what ISPs do. It's an internet service provider. They don't actually develop any standards or anything like that. They just use the existing standards. Question number 46. Which two host names follow the guidelines for naming conventions on Cisco iOS devices? Choose two. So these are basically conventions. So they are not really like rules per se, but these are conventions that most people use. And that's what they are asking here. And this when it's come to point Cisco ISO devices, right? So if you recall from your lectures, if you haven't watched my lectures, please go ahead and watch it again. I'm highlighting this today. I'm going over just the exam questions that you might get. Recall from our lectures that I already went over on my YouTube channel. The Cisco naming conventions include you need to start with a letter, contain no spaces, end with a letter or a digit, use only letters, digits and dashes. There are no special characters, and has to be less than 64 characters in length, right? So the answers to this would be this one and this guy. So these two guys follow those conventions. This one has this bracket, so that's not allowed. That's not a convention. Also, this is have a exclamation mark. This one has spaces. So all of these three breaks the rules or convention. These don't. So those are the answers. Question number 47 is which two OSI model layers have the same functionality as a single layer of TCP IP model? Remember the two models, TCP IP model and the OSI model, and they're asking like which two OSI model layers have the same functionality as a single one layer of the TCP/IP model, because the OSI model have more layers than the TCP/IP model. If you watch my videos, my lectures for CCNA, so it's going to be the data link layer and the physical layer. So recall from my lectures, the OSI data link and the physical layers together are equivalent to what in TCP/IP? I will let you think about it. That would be the network access layer. So the TCP/IP layer would have network access layer that will encompass the data link layer and the physical layer of the OSI model. And the OSI transport layer is functionality equivalent to TCP/IP transport layer, and the OSI network layer is equivalent to TCP/IP internet layer, and the OSI application presentation and session layers all together equivalent to the TCP/IP model's application layer, right? So the TCP/IP model have less layers compared to OSI model, and the data link layer and the physical layer have the same functionality as a single layer of a of a TCP/IP model. Question 48. What is a characteristic of multicast messages? They are sent to all hosts on a network. They must be acknowledged. They are sent to select group of hosts. They are sent to a single destination. So what is the purpose of a multicast messages? Even if you don't remember or you forgot what a multicast message is, the term multi, M-U-L-T-I, give you some hints. So the answer to this question here is basically that they are sent to a selected group of hosts. Multicast is a one-to-many communication, multi, and the multicast messages are addressed to a specific multicast group, but not to a specific single destination. So it can be this answer sent to a single one, and it has to be a group of hosts. So that's the answer. Question number 48. At which OSI layer is a destination IP address added to a PDU during the encapsulation process? Again, we are going back to the OSI layer model and the encapsulation process, and they're asking at what point in the OSI layer where in the model where the destination IP address is added to the PDU. Again, if you don't remember, memorize it. The answer is in the network layer. Again, I already have covered OSI model many times on my lectures on my YouTube channel. Go ahead and watch them if you don't remember. Question number 50. A user is implementing security on a small office network. Which two actions would provide the minimum security requirements for this network? So user is implementing a security on a small office network. What is the minimum that he has to do to meet some security standards? So we need to choose two. So the answers are implementing a firewall, installing a network, installing a wireless network, installing antivirus software, implementing an intrusion detection system, also known as IPS, and adding a dedicated intrusion prevention device. So we are looking for minimum, not very complex, minimum ones. Those includes the implementing a firewall and installing an antivirus software. Everything else listed here, things like installing a wireless network, that's not part of a security, and everything else like implementing intrusion detection and intrusion prevention, those are much more advanced, complex security technical concepts that not even covered in the CCN1 lecture series or program. So you don't even have to worry about it. You just need to know these exist. So implementing a firewall and installing an antivirus would be the minimum requirement. IPS, such as this one, the intrusion detection and intrusion prevention, those are typically part of advanced firewall configurations, such as Palo Alto firewalls or Cisco firewalls. So those are not considered as a minimum. Those are considered as some advanced complex security measures. Question number 51. This PDU format is used when bits are received from the network medium by network interface card or NIC of a host. File, frame, packet, segment. So this PDU format is used when bits are received from network medium by the network interface card of a host. In other words, a physical medium, right? So the answer to this question is the frame. And when received at the physical layer of a host, basically bits are formatted into the frame at the data link layer. So the packets in a PDU at the network layer is like, like a packet in a, in there, right? The segment of that PDU, get basically received by that frame. So it's just they are referring to the frame. A file is a data structure that must use that application layer, right? So the PDU basically format this in here, like the bits are basically received from the network medium as a frame. So that's the answer to question number 51. Again, I'm trying to prevent myself from going into too much detail answering this question, because I assume at this point you have already gone through my lecture series posted on my YouTube channel and just going to write your first exam, and you just need some help with that. So that's why I'm covering these Cisco questions. Question number 52. When data is encoded as pulses of light, which media is being used to transmit the data? Pulse code modulator, fiber optic cable, copper cable, light emitting diode system, and wireless. Again, this should be a very easy question to answer. I'm just going to give you a few minutes to think about it, because there's two possible answers actually here. But one of those answers are not even covered in the CCNA program. So the answer to this question is fiber optic cable, this one. However, pulse code modulators are also used in transmitting light in media, but we don't cover PCM or pulse code modulator in our CCM program. So this is probably the first time you have even hearing the term pulse code modulator, unless you have taken other classes or have experience in IT. So the answer to this question is fiber optic, because that is also the best answer out of all the answers here. LED is just a light source that may be used in fiber optics. Most of the time we use lasers. Copper cables and wireless does not use light, and therefore it has to be fiber optic cable. Again, fiber optic cables can use pulse code modulators, but that is not something we covered in CCN program, and that is actually not the best answer out of the two. So the answer is fiber optic cable. Question number 53. A large corporation has modified its network to allow users to access network resources from their personal laptops and smartphones. Which networking trend does this describe? Cloud computing, online collaboration, hot swap, bring your own device, or BYOD. So basically we have a large organization that has modified its network to allow users to access resources from their personal device. The key term here is the personal device, personal laptops and smartphones. So this personal term basically mean that is bring your own device. In other words, instead of the corporation providing the devices to access their network, the user will use their own network, like their home computer, to access their network. So that is BYOD. Question 54. This interface allows remote management of a layer 2 switch. Come on guys, I have hammered this to your head for the last couple of minutes on multiple different questions that Cisco could ask with respect to their Cisco layer 2 switch remote management interfaces. So the answers here are the aux interface, the console port interface, the switch virtual interface, and the first Ethernet port interface. You should know this answer right away. We discussed this multiple times. The answer is the switch virtual interface, also known as SVI. You may have noticed a trend here that Cisco put a lot of emphasis on the SVI. So make sure you know SVI like back of your hand, because this particular SVI related questions, these type of SVI related questions will appear on your exam. So keep that in mind. Question number 55. What two criteria are used to select a network medium from various network media? So we need to pick two of them. The types of data that need to be prioritized, the distance the selecting medium can successfully carry a signal, the number of intermediary devices installed in a network, the environment where the selected medium is to be installed. So what two criteria out of all of these that help select a network medium from various network media? As a networking engineer, as a network technician, So think about this. The criteria for choosing network medium, what is needed, right? When you're thinking about selecting it. So those include the distance the selected medium can successfully carry a signal and the environment where the selected medium will be installed. Those are very two key important things as a network technician you should know. Distance, for example, if you're doing very large thousands of kilometer distance or hundreds of kilometer distance, you should be using fiber optics, for example. And if you're using if you're installing a wireless network, you also need to think about distance with the wireless signal can carry and the environment in which the medium will be installed. So whether it's inside a building, outside a building, how it will be installed, etc., etc. So those are the two answers for question number 5. Sorry, question number 55. Question number 56. This organization is responsible for overseeing and managing IP access allocation, domain management, and protocol identifiers. Again, this is one of those things you have to memorize if you don't know what they are. IANA, ISO, EIA, ISOC, IEEE. Again, IANA is the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. You should know that. ISO is the International Organization for Standardization. Again, you should know that by the name. EIA is basically Energy Information Association. ISOC is the Internet Society, and the IEEE is the Institute of Electrical Engineers, Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, IEEE. So this organization is responsible for overseeing, managing IP addresses, allocation, domain names, and protocol. If you know what these abbreviations stand for, you would know right away it is IANA, which is the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. They assign the numbers, names, etc., etc. They are responsible for many things like domain names to allocation of IP addresses, etc. Again, on your Cisco exam, this is how the answer is going to show up. This is how the answer is going to be. It's not going to say that IANA stands for Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. You should know that by heart. That's what it stands for. So you can answer the question that being asked right here. Question number 57. At which OSI layer is a source IP address added to a PDU during the encapsulation process? At which OSI layer is a source IP address added to a PDU during the encapsulation process? Data link layer, network layer, transport layer, application layer. Again, you need to know your OSI layer like back of your hand. And if you knew that, you would know it is network layer. Again, I'm not going to go into detail anymore. Just remember that the answer to this question is network layer. Question number 58. At which OSI layer is destination port number added to a PDU during encapsulation process? Again, you need to know your OSI layer like back of your hand. Transport layer, data link layer, network layer, application layer. So destination port number added to a PDU at the transport layer. So the answer to this question is transport layer. Question number 59. What term describes a policy that allows network devices to manage the flow of data to give priority to voice and video? In other words, when you have a whole bunch of data coming into your network and being exchanged between devices, how do you give priority to voice and video? Quality of service, internet, intranet, extranet, firewall rules, VPN protocols. So if you remember quality of service, the main purpose of the quality of service is to make sure that the packets that are time sensitive and need a certain bandwidth and allocation can be given priority. So that's the answer, the quality of service. Firewall rules will prevent certain packets from leaving or entering your network or leaving or entering a device within your network, such as a server. and that cannot that's not being used for the prioritizing video or audio data, but the quality of service is what we can use to tag those packets and give priority for voice and video data. Question number 60. This organization promotes the open development, evolution, and use of internet throughout the world. So this is the organization that is responsible for open development, evolution, and the use of internet throughout the world. Again, you need to know what INA, ISO, EIA, ISOC, and IEEE stand for. I'm not going to repeat those again because I already have repeated multiple times. For this particular question, the answer is ISOC, which is the Internet Society. It is a society that, or organization that promotes the development of open development, of evolution, of use of the internet throughout the world. That makes standardization internet across the board. Question 61. Which method allows a computer to react accordingly when it requests data from a server and the server takes too long to respond? In other words, we request data, we are waiting for the packet to come in, but the packet doesn't come in. So does the port be still open and the server is going to wait, or what it's going to do? So how does that is determined? Encapsulation, flow control, access method, response timeout, time to live. Out of all these answers, we have 5 answers: encapsulation, flow control, access method, response timeout, and time to live. The 2 answers for me just stand out. Those are response timeout and time to live. Out of those 2, the correct answer is the response timeout. If a computer makes a request and does not hear within a certain time period, which is called the response time period, that will basically time out. That's what we call the response timeout, and then basically the device assume there is no answer is coming. So the answer to question number 61 is a response timeout. The time to live is, or TTL, is something that is contained within a packet, where the packet try to reach a destination, and if the packet cannot reach it, the packet dies out. That's called the time to live, because the packet is basically being destroyed. So in order to prevent the network being clogged up. So the response timeout is what actually allow a computer to react according to the request data from a server, and then it's taking too long when the packet doesn't arrive at the destination. Question number 62. Why would a layer 2 switch need an IP address? Again, Cisco is putting a lot of emphasis in this first couple of modules and putting this into your module exams, hammering into your head the importance of this one particular thing. This is so important in Cisco switches. So why would a layer 2 switch need an IP address? To enable switch to send broadcast frames to attached PCs, to enable switch to function as a default gateway, to enable switch to be managed remotely, to enable switch to receive frames from attached PCs. Remember, switches do not need IP addresses to do majority of the functions, almost all of the functions. So why would a switch would need it? So layer 2 switches need an IP address for one purpose, that is for SVI, the virtual interface that we will be used to manage the switch remotely. The only way you can access access the switch remotely if that switch has an IP address, so that we can use that to communicate remotely, right? So SVI needs to be configured with an IP address in order for it to be able to manage remotely. So the answer is to enable switch to be managed remotely. Question number 63. What term describes a private collection of local area network, also known as LAN, and wide area network WAN that belongs to an organization? What term, in other words, what term best describes a private collection of LANs and WANs? Internet, intranet, extranet, WAN, peer-to-peer, VPN. This should be an easy answer. The answer is intranet. Intranet, as is referred to as internal networks, that could be LANs and WANs. LAN could be, you have a campus building, that entire building network is LAN, but you have multiple buildings across the area, that could be a WAN. So that is intranet. VPN is also a private collection of local area networks and wide area networks belong to an organization. However, VPN is a virtual private network that allow interoperability and connectivity among your private collection of LANs and WANs across a large area across the internet. So don't get confused between the intranet and VPN. The answer to this question is intranet. And again, in CCNA 1, we haven't even introduced you to VPN, so it shouldn't be an answer at this point anyway, because this is the first couple of modules that we are doing. This is a module exam. So keep that in mind when you're writing CCNA 1 exam or CCNA 2, 3 exams. Think about at what point that you are taking this exam. This exam, what I'm covering today is only covering the first couple of modules, because this is a module term exam, right? So keep that in mind. The VPN not even part of that. Question number 64. At which OSI layer is a source MAC address added to a PDU during encapsulation process? At which OSI layer is a source MAC address? So you need to think about OSI model again compared to TCP IP models, etc. Data link layer, application layer, transport layer, presentation layer. Again, if you know your OSI model, the answer is data link layer. It's pretty obvious. If you don't know, go ahead and check my YouTube channel for those videos. Question number 65. What term describes storing personal files on servers over the internet to provide access anywhere, anytime on any device? Not sorting, sorry about that, storing. So what term describes storing personal files on servers? In other words, saving data on servers so you can access anywhere. Cloud, BYOD, VPN, QoS, converge. Again, the only two things that you might be confused about is the cloud and VPN. And the answer to this question is cloud, because cloud allows us to put files anywhere. Sorry, put files on somebody else's server pretty much, and can access from anywhere. This, such as the Microsoft Azure cloud, the Google cloud, AWS, etc., etc. It allows you to access not only files but also services from servers, such as Microsoft Exchange host on a Microsoft cloud. That's the answer to the question. VPN allows your people to access data from your network, but it's not stored, in a way that the cloud storing data where you can access anywhere, anytime, even without a secure connection. Sometimes you can access cloud data. So the answer to this question is cloud. Again, VPN haven't been even covered at this point in CCNA class. Question number 66. What is an advantage of network devices using open standard protocols? So why do we even use open standard protocols? Network communication is confined to data transfers between devices from the same vendor. A network host and a server running different operating systems can successfully exchange data. Sorry, a client host and a server running the different operating system can successfully exchange data. Internet access can be controlled by a single ISP in each market. Competition and innovation are limited to specific type of products. So again, why do we even use the open standard protocols? In other words, what are the advantages, right? So the reason why we have open standard protocols such as the TCP IP suite, that the clients and servers running different operating systems can communicate with each other. Doesn't matter whether you have a Cisco iOS device switch and a router made by IBM or a Linksys or some other company. They can communicate with each other. A Microsoft Windows server can communicate with a Linux or a Mac OS end client, no problem, right? So a client and a host server running different operating system can successfully exchange data because we are using the open standard protocols. Question number 67. At which OSI layer is a source port number added to a PDU during encapsulation process? So where do we add the source port number? Data link layer, application layer, network layer, presentation layer, transport layer. So what's the answer out of these 5? Again, you need to just know the OSI model. If you don't remember, go check my videos. The answer is transport layer. I'm not going to spend too much time here. I'm going to go to the next one. Question number 68. What are 2 characteristics of RAM on a Cisco device? So this is a Cisco device specific question again. So what are the characteristics of Cisco RAM, right? RAM provides non-volatile storage. Configuration that is actively running on the device is stored on RAM. The contents of a RAM are lost during a power cycle. RAM is a component in Cisco switches but not in Cisco routers. RAM is able to store multiple versions of iOS and configuration files. So what are the correct answers here? So if you have done your Cisco labs, you should know the answers are the configuration that is actively running on devices is stored in RAM, and the contents of a RAM are lost during a power cycle. So that's why when you're entering a whole bunch of commands and configurations, you need to make sure to do the commands for saving those configurations onto the device. Otherwise, it will be lost from the RAM. Question number 69. At which OSI layer is data added to a PDU during the encapsulation process? Again, another question related to OSI layer. This is why you need to remember your OSI layer and the TCP IP model, for your exam questions, because this is going to come up over and over. So in this question, they are asking in the OSI layer model, data is added to a PDU during what encapsulation process, right? So data link layer, application layer, network layer, presentation layer, transport layer. What layer? This happened, right? The answer to this question is application layer. Again, you just need to know your OSI model. Question number 70. Which command or key combination allows a user to return to previous level in the command hierarchy, right? In Cisco or iOS device. End exit CTRL with the ZZ, CTRL C. Which one is better? Which one is correct, right? The answer is exit. You enter exit and you enter exit on the keyboard and press enter. That will allow you to return to the previous level of the hierarchy of where you are on the Cisco iOS devices. Question number 71. At which OSI layer is a destination MAC address added to a PDU during the encapsulation process? Again, another OSI layer related question. So in this question, we're asking at which OSI layer is destination MAC address added to a PDU during the encapsulation process? Data link layer, application layer, network layer, presentation layer, and transport layer. Those are the answers given to us. And the answer to this question is the data link layer. So that's the answer, data link layer. Again, you just need to know the OSI model. Question number 72. Which are the devices like on your network that are considered as end devices? Remember at the very beginning, we have a few questions about end devices and intermediate devices. So we're asking the same question in a way that, we want the end devices now. Host, printers, routers, switches, and servers. Remember, on a network, I drew a diagram and I showed that the intermediary devices are devices such as the switches and routers, right? So in other words, the answers are hosts, printers, and servers, because those are end devices, those sticking at the end of your, end of your network. That is the end of this lecture covering possible exam questions for Cisco lectures module 1 to 3. And again, if you don't have any idea what to study, go ahead and watch the CCNA module 1, CCNA module 2, and CCNA module 3 under my CCNA 1 Introduction to Networks lecture series. If you just watch these 3 videos, these 3 lectures, then you go over what I just covered for exam questions. You should be good to write your module 1 to 3 exams. If you have any questions related to Cisco CCNA, please reach out to me. And again, if you have any concerns or questions related to anything else, CCNA 2 or CCNA 3, feel free to contact me through YouTube or in other means. If you like these type of lectures covering exam questions, specific exams questions for different modules, please make sure to thumbs up this video and subscribe to my channel. Until next time, thank you so much and have a nice day.